Welcome to Real Estate Investing Abundance, the show for busy, fulfilled professionals like you to learn how to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. Now, here is your host, Dr. Alan Lomax.
Hello, enlightened investors. I'm your host, Dr. Alan. If you are investing in real estate today, you know that we're in a strong seller's market, and it is tough to find properties that both cash flow and yield returns worth the investment risk. So I am delighted to be with you today as we discover how to ensure cash flow with buying these overpriced rental property assets in today's market with an investment banker who has more than 25 years of commercial investment banking expertise. Terry Painter is the author of the Encyclopedia of Commercial Real Estate Advice and a contributing writer for Forbes.com. He is the founder of Apartment Loan Store and Business Loan Store, commercial mortgage banking and advisory firms that have closed over $4 billion in commercial loans since 1997. So Terry, start us off by sharing a memorable experience from your formative years that helped you to be the person you are today.
Hey, thanks for having me, Alan. Well, what comes to mind is when I was 8 years old, I really disliked the clothes my mother bought me because she was really a bargain hunter. And she would find that my brother was a year and a half older. She would buy like maybe 3 pairs of ugly corduroy pants in different sizes. So I got them for maybe 6 years worth of corduroy pants. So anyway, so I decided I needed to learn how to make money. And what I did is I actually, surprisingly, what I started doing is actually selling rings from the gumball machine to girls that were my friends. And I put them in nice jewelry store boxes. And what happened is that, and then I had a relative that's had a jewelry store who gave me the idea. So what I did is I actually, also I asked him, well, how do you make money? And he told me, well, if I buy something for $1, I charge $4 for it. And I thought, oh, that makes sense. So, and then he said, I also make money by selling things on time payments. And he explained that. So I decided that, I'm going to do that too. So anyway, what happened is that the girls loved the rings. They loved the boxes probably even more, the professional ring boxes. And even though I only sold them for like maybe 50 cents, and then I started selling them on time payments. Anyway, the short of the story is that my mother made me give all the money back after some of the mothers complained that the girls had to keep paying me out of their allowances going forward. So I thought, hey, wait a minute, this doesn't make sense. I mean, like, how can you make money in business if you have to give the money back? Well, anyway, so I started another business, which was selling the sandwiches that my mother made in the freezer for our school lunches to the workmen. We were living in a cornfield in Illinois. And so I just really learned how to make money. And before you knew it, I was selling like $20 worth of food a day. My parents helped support me do that business. And surprisingly, I was able to dress however I wanted to and buy as much candy as I wanted and so on. So I decided making money where it was at.
Well, that is obviously a very intelligent child and one who learned something very valuable in life. And wow, that's a motivated 8-year-old for sure to go into that kind of enterprise. And I'm sure it served you well for the rest of your life here. Well, Terry, take us into commercial banking by first of all explaining how commercial banking is different from retail banking.
I think what you're asking me is how do commercial loans differ from residential loans? Okay, so let's just take a look at that. Like certainly over 90% of all lending in America for real estate is done on the residential side. And yet the people who own the commercial properties are the ones who are the wealthier people in our society. And so it's just that the main difference between residential and commercial is that on residential, for a residential loan, there's 2 pre-qualifications. What you have is the borrower, which is really number one right now, especially since the Great Recession. And just that they have a high enough credit score, they have post-closing cash in the bank, and they have a good income. You can't be broke and get a residential loan today. The second pre-approval is for the property itself, that it's going to appraise at sales price at least and be in good condition. So that's two. So we have the quality of the borrower, we have the quality of the property. That's two pre-approvals. Okay. So that's what you've got to get right when you're applying for the residential loan that you want. Well, if you could imagine this, to hit all the nails on the head and hit a home run on a commercial loan, there are 7 pre-approvals. And I go over these in detail in my book. And so actually, since the Great Recession, you would think it used to be the income of the property was number one. But with commercial lending now, it's actually the quality of the borrower again. Even if wherever you're getting your loan, nobody really wants to make a loan to somebody who doesn't have at least 1 or 2 sources of verifiable income. And they're not going to allow you to be broke at the closing table once the loan closes. So even hard money lenders don't want you to be broke. So on the commercial side, the quality of the borrower, part of that is having experience. So if you want to buy an apartment building, sure, you could, at a community bank, you could extrapolate having owned, 2 or 3 or 4 rental homes. However, if you want to get let's just say if you want to branch out and do what we call an agency loan from Fannie or Freddie Mac on an apartment building, it's better if you have some experience, or you have to bring in a partner that does. So the quality of the borrower is king today. Next comes the quality of the income. So unlike residential income property, there's not really, even if you are buying this as a rental, the lender is really looking at your ability to make those loan payments from your sources of income first. And be sure they like the idea of having income on the property. But actually the income of the property based on a debt service coverage ratio, I don't want to make this too technical, but is really important to lenders. So what you want to do when you're applying for a commercial loan is make sure that the property, you want to know what that debt service ratio is. And for multifamily properties, it's usually about 1.25, which means that for every $1 of loan payment, that you're going to have another 25 cents left over just for profit. So another really important quality, and this really comes in, pre-qualification is the quality of the location. And this is something that you mentioned, by finding properties in this overpriced rental real estate market and commercial real estate market today. Buying in a good neighborhood is really essential. A good, safe neighborhood where people have good jobs, or even people who have retirement income. Perhaps not buying in blue-collar neighborhoods where properties need a lot of work, because you're going to be overpaying for those today. So taking a look at the quality of the location is really important. Another pre-qualification for commercial lending is the quality of the tenants. Well, if it's a strip mall, they really would like to have tenants that have ideally good credit scores on their businesses. They're good business credit, and also have more than one location. You really don't want to have, for instance, a type of tenant that might be not do well during a recession, and you want to have a good balance of tenants. The quality of the leases is another pre-qualification. So for like an apartment building, we have all the tenants on month-to-month leases. That is a kind of a red flag to a lender that people come and go. And so the mitigation for that is is if you can show that those people have lived there for a long time. So part of the quality of going back to the quality of the tenants is, not having too many Section 8 renters. Having some is okay, but let's just say, but even for Fannie Mae, having more than 40% is a red flag. So we like to keep, Section 8 tenancy at 40% or lower. It's not to say that, Section 8 tenants, because the housing authorities are paying most of the rent usually, could be good tenants. But anyway, but that's part of the quality of the tenants. And getting back to, and then also getting back to the quality of the leases, we like to see, for retail, office, or industrial, we like to see, at least 3 years or longer left on the leases. Can you really make like a 5 or 10 year loan to somebody commercially if the lease is going to run out in 6 months, or even for that matter, less than a year? So That's important.
I mean, I would think that they would be concerned if all of the tenants' leases were coming up at the same time. Would that be a red flag? I would think it would be.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially for retail, or like right now, I'm working on a deal for a client that actually invests very heavily in retail or office, but he invests in office properties, and so he found a property in Oklahoma that just it's actually being sold for $28 million. It's actually, I believe it's 16 large office buildings. And the problem is that the majority of the leases have less than 1 year left on them. He wants 10-year fixed rate financing. Well, sorry. So what I have to do for him now is do a bridge loan so he could acquire the property at 80% leverage. And then the property has great occupancy in a time where, because of COVID, office properties have have distressed occupancy. A lot of them do. So it's not that, but it's just the tenants. It's got a great upside. The rents are under market, So, but the leases are the problem with this property. So because of that, the guy's got great experience. He's got great net worth, great liquidity. The property's in a good location in Oklahoma City. It's, everything's stellar about this, but there's one, the 7 pre-approvals, which is the quality of the leases are not great.
Well, that
so I could do a bridge loan, and then once the leases, because there's a lot of rollover, what we call rollover. Once we factor that in, I can't make a loan to him on any of my commercial real estate loan programs. But what I can do is a bridge loan for 2 or 3 years until he gets the leases improved.
That would concern me if all of the leases are coming up within 6 months to a year of just acquiring a property. That could be a significant challenge. Well, one thing surprised me about what you were saying, and that has to do with the Section 8 being problematic, because investor after investor that I have spoken to have, in many instances, relied upon their Section 8 tenants to take them through this pandemic because, the Section 8 tenants in many cases were the only ones who had income to carry a number of our investors through this pandemic.
Yeah, excuse me for interrupting, Alan, but I don't agree. I agree with you on that totally. Most of my my clients that have experience rented to Section 8 and they know how to do it properly, do a great job. And during the coronavirus recession, blue collar workers who are making less than $15 an hour, a lot of them were not paying their rent, where just about all the Section 8 tenants, where the housing authority was paying the majority of the rent, especially, were paying their rent like clockwork. So that, so as far as recessions go, absolutely, they make good tenants. It's just that my comment was more that Fannie Mae and, let's just say securitized loans that are part of my world prefer not to have too many, not have the majority be Section 8.
We'll be right back after a brief announcement. Are you a busy professional, passionate about the work of your calling, yet realize that even though you love what you are doing, you're exchanging your time for money? You know that if you were to lose the ability to exchange time for money, your financial well-being will be in jeopardy. If you can relate, I have great news. Steed Tucker Capital is an investment company designed for professionals to develop financial independence built on solid passive real estate investments. Remove the anxiety of an uncertain financial future and go to steedtucker.com. Get your free one-page 10-step guide to passive real estate investing.
Well, I understand the stigma with Section 8, but those who are successful with Section 8 tenants, they know how to screen them, and they screen them well so that they are actually getting good tenants with essentially a guarantee of payment, which I would think Fannie Mae would have some flexibility with that. That's I
think banks, there's quite a few commercial real estate lending programs that don't have any problem. And like HUD even prefers Section 8, renters, they don't mandate it, but, and so anyway, it's an important part, but I think probably since we're talking about Section 8, so all of your listeners understand what that is. It's actually a voucher that HUD oversees, but it's actually issued by local housing authorities. And the voucher, if the tenant has a job or is retired, they make the best Section 8 tenants, even though they might only be paying 30% of the rent. But they're senior citizens quite often on low incomes are have Section 8 vouchers,
Right,
and they
yeah.
make some of the very best renters out there.
Absolutely. But I mean, like any tenant, they have to be screened.
Right.
Just because they're on Section 8 and a portion of their rent is going to be paid does not make them necessarily a good tenant. But there is also another thing about Section 8, and that is that it's not easy to become a Section 8 tenant, at least in our part of the world.
Yes.
There are extensive waiting lines for people trying to get onto Section 8.
1 to 2 years
Yeah.
right now, yeah.
And so most Section 8 tenants understand that they can lose that privilege very, very quickly. So they can make for good tenants. So that surprised me about Fannie and their hesitancy to go with more than 45% there. Well, talk to us a little bit here about how it is that investors can be certain that they are going to be able to break even within 2 years, even if their occupancy rates drop to as low as 75%.
Okay, yeah. In my book, I go over 12 recession-proof items that you should try to put in as many as you can when into a project when you're purchasing commercial real estate today. And it's even more important today when properties values are so inflated. And there's, like as you mentioned, there's very little income from operations during the first couple of years, especially until you can raise rents. So, but probably the second most important one that I mentioned in my book is having a break-even ratio of 75%. That means that you could pay all after rental income, you could pay all the expenses and the mortgage payment at 75% occupancy. So if you lose 25% of your tenants or 25% of your tenants aren't paying the rent, then you break even. Well, that makes you pretty bulletproof, as you could imagine. Certainly with multifamily, you're not going to lose occupancy in this day and age down to 75%, but you could be in a situation where 25% of your tenants aren't paying rent during a recession. So,
or during a pandemic.
Yeah, or during the pandemic, that did happen to some landlords, and so that's just one item to make the property recession-proof when you're choosing a property. Now, it's not going to happen probably out of the gate, but what you're going to do is probably a 5-year pro forma, and what you're going to do is make sure, based upon your projected income and expenses, that at least in 2 years, with rental increases and the improvements you're making to the property, you want to inflate expenses about 3% as well a year. That within 2 years you're going to be able to break even at 75% occupancy. I assure you that if you hit that number, you're going to be pretty bulletproof. I'm going to bring up another recession-proof strategy, and that's to make sure that you have working capital, not only for yourself, but for the property. So what you want to do is have your rainy day fund. So if something happens to, let's say you own a rental business and your wife's a school teacher and you have retirement income. So now a recession hits, you still have the retirement income, but you don't have, but the rentals are breaking even. No income there. So in this case, just having some personal savings is really important. But also, I recommend to my groups that do syndications that they always have some working capital for their investment. And so that's another. So my clients that actually had cash in the bank, made it through the Great Recession. Those that every time they had any cash bought into the property and were broke did not make it through the recession. So there you go, the Great Recession.
Well, what is your recommendation in terms of, percentage of expenses in terms of the reserve?
What I like to, so what happens to rental properties, whether it's a single family home or let's say a 60-unit apartment building, is that everybody, when they buy an apartment building, they really everybody tends to look more at the positive. And they take a look, and quite often sellers, they actually put in a minimum amount. The year that they're selling, they kind of scale back on repairs and maintenance, because especially in today's market, seller's market, as you mentioned, what we're seeing is C quality properties that have quite a bit of deferred maintenance being sold at the same price it's friggin' B properties are going for. Just because there's such a shortage of inventory of especially multifamily properties for sale. So what you want to do is start out by raising the cost of repairs and maintenance to like what we do. We don't really like to see, we're talking about multifamily, let's say less than probably $750 per unit per year, and $1,200 per unit per year would make this even more bulletproof. So what we're going to do is because what happens is that we just take a look at where cap rates are set, where where NOIs are, net operating incomes are. They might be based on not the average of what this property is going to run when it gets older, but And so just to answer your question, I would have at least 4 months of all repairs and maintenance based on that, let's say $750 per unit per year put aside this is in my book, just in a rainy day fund, and what you could do is, if you take money out of it, then put money back in as it's generated, but keep that maintained. Does that? Yeah.
For how long would you maintain that 4 months? Indefinitely, or?
I would keep it almost indefinitely. However, if you are not using it and it gets over that 4 amount a month, it gets over, you could actually stop putting cash into for a while. But like on our securitized loan programs, for instance, larger loans, we're talking about over $2 million. We actually require what we call replacement reserve accounts, where we collect that amount, that we could collect anywhere from $150 per unit per year to, on more rundown properties, $400 per unit per year for repairs and maintenance. And we collect that money monthly. It's just, per unit per year. So we're doing the same thing, but that money is yours to use when you need to replace a hot water heater or resurface the driveway in an apartment complex. But these are really important. And the experienced capital groups that do syndications know this, and they always have reserved capital in an account for unexpected expenses.
Absolutely. Because, you never know when a pandemic is going to hit, a recession is going to hit. Many people think that you can predict these things, but you can't.
Yeah, it's like I have a client a couple of months ago that bought a multifamily property that had the old boiler system, and there was master metered utilities, and there was a RUBS in place where the utilities were being paid now by the tenants, prorated. Great. But the problem was now we had to replace that entire system because it was costing just too much annually. Mm-hmm. So, putting in a whole new HVAC system in for, I think it was 120 some units, you can imagine what that would cost. And he had to actually take a loan out on his private residence to do that. So that's not fun.
No, that is not fun. And of course, the older the properties, the more likelihood that there are going to be these types of repair and maintenance situations that are going to arise, no matter how good it looks going into it. The older the property, the higher the risk, essentially. Well, how do we choose inexpensive value adds? And when we're looking at discounted properties that are in that C-class type of arena, which are generally going to be anything older than the 1980s.
Sure.
How can we go into those and be fairly well self-assured that the value adds that we are looking at and intending to do are in the less expensive range?
Yeah. Well, in my book, I have a chapter on repositioning, which is what we're talking about here. And value adds could cost nothing. I mean, if you buy a property that has under market rents, and you know that within a matter of 2 to 6 months to even a year, that you could bring those rents up to market rents, especially in this very low vacancy market that we have nationally right today. Because home prices, buying a home is just so unobtainable to so many people today. So value adds that cost nothing are the best. We're talking about, number one, raising rents and lowering expenses. So if you just actually shopping competitively for insurance is a big one. Just keep in mind that when you buy from an independent insurance agent, it's not to say that they can't be competitive, but they earn, an average of, let's say, 15% of your premium. So obviously, if you work directly with, let's say, American Family or State Farm, or and compete them against each other, you're going to get a lower premium. So lowering expenses is important. But just sticking today with cosmetic value adds. We're talking about new paint, new floor coverings, perhaps new window coverings. No, you're not going to put in new kitchens. You're not going to knock down walls and make the units, bring the units up to date, because you're not going to be able to buy a property that needs all that for a price today that affords that. And so so you really do want to stick with these overpriced properties today, commercial properties, multifamily properties. You really want to stick to what we call either economic or just, the gingerbreading value adds. New paint, as I mentioned, floor coverings. If you paint the cabinets, don't replace them. Keep that down. Okay, I think we just lost you there for a second. So this is not a time to buy a property that has very low occupancy and needs to be rehabbed, because the seller's going to want too much money for that. It's probably not going to pencil.
Yeah, right. Well, Terry shared a lot of really good things, good ideas with us here today. So how can our viewers and listeners make contact with you, and what do you have to offer them when they make contact?
Thanks. Actually, okay. So my company is Apartment Loan Stores. You could go to apartmentloanstore.com. I have a website for my book, the Encyclopedia of Commercial Real Estate Advice.com. And I also have a YouTube channel by that same title of my book, the Encyclopedia of Commercial Real Estate Advice.
Okay.
So there you go.
Well, excellent. Well, before we conclude here, Terry, share with us one of your most difficult setbacks in life, and how did you come through that time, and what did you learn from that experience?
Say again, I'm sorry.
What was one of the most difficult setbacks you've experienced in life, and how did you come through that time, and what did you learn from that? So that's kind of a multi-question in one question.
Yeah, well, I would say probably the greatest setback I had was towards the end of 2008. I had to lay off a lot of employees, and we had a large company, and during the Great Recession, we literally could not. Our underwriting was changing before we could actually even approve the loans. And we were selling a lot of loans on the secondary market. And one of the worst things that's ever happened to me is that we actually had documents that people signed at the title companies, and the money never arrived because we sold our loans. We actually sold our loans in those days simultaneously at closing. And so I'm kind of smiling about it now, but it was really awful. We were correspondents for Lehman Brothers, IndyMac Bank, and a few others that actually never sent us the money so we could close those loans. So it was a huge challenge. And what I had to do is just really pound the pavement and fight to get money elsewhere and take care of my clients, because my word is the most important thing to me. And so, and also, the other part of it is I really believed in myself. And even though I went down to losing just about everything because I couldn't make a living selling money anymore, I always believed in myself, and I knew that I would make it back. And here I am today. So there you go.
Well, Terry, it's been a pleasure having you. Enjoyed the conversation and been very enlightening. Thanks for being with us today.
Thanks for having me, Alan. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to Real Estate Investing Abundance, brought to you by Steve Talker Capital, a company working for passionate professionals like you to develop financial independence built on solid, passive real estate investments. As part of our efforts to make the world a better place, Steve Talker Capital contributes to activities and organizations committed to better understand the equine. These endeavors attempt to enhance the human treatment of horses worldwide. Steve Talker Capital, working for a world where all creatures great and small flourish abundantly. For resources to develop your financial independence, connect with us at stevetalker.com.